Fellas, what would happen if Jonathan Dwight Jones started his career in 2023? Now, Jon Jones, I think we can all agree he's the greatest of all time, or is at least one of them. If you're going to go with the whole steroid thing, then you've got to at least put him in the top five greatest of all time. But I want to know how differently his career would be if he debuted in the UFC in 2023. So, same weight class, same everything, but the opposition and everything was in 2023. Let me just sort my mic out. There we go. But yeah, if he started in 2023 and joined the UFC in 2023, how different would his UFC career be? Would he even be the greatest of all time? Please let me know if you agree with these takes or not, because yeah, we're just going to get straight into it with step one, his early UFC career. Now, his first three fights would be against Cans, like every pretty much high prospect in the UFC. First three fights would be against Cans, and I think he finishes all of them. Well, I wouldn't call Jim Crute necessarily a Can. Jim Crute's all right, but he wouldn't beat Jon Jones. Jon Jones would probably win by, I don't know, because Jim Crute can submit anyway. Yeah, he'll go through. I'm just picking up random names from the rankings, unranked people. We've got Tyson Pedro, Jim Crute, and then Kennedy. I'm not trying to pronounce his last name. I'll sound like Chael Sonnen, but yeah, we just got some random unranked light heavyweights for him to beat. Just for him to start his career off. He'd finish all of them. Maybe not Jim Crute, but he'd finish the rest of them off. And yeah, that's pretty similar to his current UFC career. He only had like 3 or 4 fights, or 3 to 5 fights before he got a title shot. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to give him 3 opponents, just unranked opponents for him to beat before he gets a title shot. And I think he'll have a lot of momentum. I think he'll definitely finish Tyson Pedro. Could finish Jim Crute, I'm not sure. And I think he'd finish Kennedy, but yeah, I think he finishes all of them. Even with his 2009 skill set, I still think it's still enough to beat a lot of these people. He had insane judo. His boxing was quite poor, but he had great kicks. He was long. His submission game was great. Um, yeah, Jon Jones was a beast in 2009, and I think if you just give him 3 cans, and it doesn't necessarily have to be these 3 people. I'm just bringing up random examples of unranked light heavyweights. You can give him any 3 unranked light heavyweights for him to beat, and he'd probably beat them all and finish most of them. So that'll be his first steps to his UFC career, just beating a couple cans and getting a few wins. And yeah, that's his early UFC career. I think he'd run through him, and he'd probably just be an undefeated prospect, like a lot of people, like Bo Nickel maybe. Is a good example of one. Just an undefeated prospect in the UFC who is yet to face someone ranked. People have been slating him, saying he'd lose if he fought anyone ranked, like you do with any undefeated fighter, you know. But yeah, that's his early UFC career. Then we move on to his title shot. Now, his road to a title shot. Now, if he's undefeated and coming off 3 finishes, he's likely going to get a title shot after he's beaten a couple decent opponents. And so the decent opponents that he needs to face, again, I'm just bringing up examples. Now, let's say Jones has beaten 3 people in his UFC career pretty dominantly, and we now need to give this undefeated prospect some ranked opponents. I'm just bringing some examples. The first one is Ryan Spann. I think Ryan Spann's a good example. He should be low ranked. He just lost to Anthony Smith. Before that, he just got submitted by Nikita Krylov. So Ryan Spann, he's probably going to stay ranked, but between the 15 and 10 area, because let's be honest, he's trash. But I think he could be a good match for Jon Jones. He's losing. Jon Jones is winning, yet to face someone ranked. Immediately goes in there, faces Ryan Spann, and yeah, Jon Jones would submit Ryan Spann. If Ryan Spann gets submitted by Nikita Krylov and he loses to Anthony Smith, Jon Jones would beat him however he wanted to. He'd take him down with his judo, trip him, slam him, whatever. Maybe not slam him because Ryan Spann's a big fella, but he'd take him down, find a submission, easy work for Jones. So that's fight one. Now at this point, Jon Jones would have faced a ranked opponent, and now he needs to face one more, usually around one more opponent before a title shot. And I think Jan Blachowicz at this point. Now, obviously, I can't really predict the future. I can't say that after Jon Jones has beaten Ryan Spann, Jan Blachowicz is still not going to have another fight. But obviously, this is just theoretical. So let's say he's beaten Ryan Spann. Now let's give him Jan Blachowicz. Now, Blachowicz right now isn't in a great spot in his career. He got submitted by Glover Teixeira. Then he got a win over Alexander Rakic, but it wasn't really a win because he got injured. Um, then he's really inactive. Recently, he just lost to Alex Pereira as well. Before that, he drew with Ankalaev, but Ankalaev should have won. So Jan Blachowicz isn't in a great spot, but he has been he is a former champion, so he's still a credible win. Listen, he's knocked out Dominic Reyes. You know, he's beaten all these people. He was a former champion. He's beaten Israel Adesanya before, so he's still a credible win. But he's in a very bad spot, and that's a good opponent for Jon Jones to face if he wants to get a title shot. Now again, if you're just it depends how Jon Jones and how dominant he is in this stage. Because if he's barely getting wins over people like Ryan Spann, I'm not sure beating Jan Blachowicz is going to get him a title shot, because Blachowicz he's in a bit of a dodgy career stage. But if he's just dominated Ryan Spann and he goes in there and dominates Jan Blachowicz, which I think he would, I think he'd beat Jan Blachowicz pretty comfortably. I think he just takes him down and, well, yeah, I think you just take him down and submit him. And even on the feet, I mean, Jan Blachowicz is probably slightly better than Jones on the feet, at least in the boxing side of things. But when it comes to kicking and elbows and all that clinch work, Jones wins. Well, I think Jones has way more tools than Jan Blachowicz, so I think Jones would find a way to finish him within 5 rounds, especially with the fact that Jan Blachowicz's cardio in his last fight wasn't great. And I'm aware that that was in Utah, so obviously the sea level dodgy stuff business. We don't want to talk about that, but I think Jones would finish Blachowicz in 5, and then that would probably deserve him a title shot. You know, beating 2 ranked opponents, huge prospect at this point. And yeah, 2 credible wins for Jones. And let's say he gets a title shot. Now, if Jones was to get a title shot, I assume it would be against Pereira or Ankalaev. Now, I'm just looking in the future. I think Pereira would probably be. I think Pereira is going to beat Yuri Prohaska. And Ankalaev most likely beats Johnny Walker. So I think you'd have to either face one of these two for a title shot. It just depends who's fighting for the belt or who's champ at the time. Jamal Hill is probably still going to be a bit inactive, or he might need another tune-up fight before he gets an immediate title shot. So I'm going to say he faces either Pereira or Ankalaev. If it's Pereira, it's going to be a fairly easy fight for Jones. I mean, he can kind of keep Pereira away from him with range. Now, Pereira is a way better striker than Jon Jones. I'm not trying to say that in any way, shape or form Jones beats Pereira on the feet. I'm just saying with his long legs, I think he might be able to keep him away. But within a couple of minutes, he'll get him down. And I know Pereira's improved his takedown defense massively since working with Glover Teixeira, but I'm just saying Jon Jones is a different animal. Look what he did to Cyril Gane. I think he'd do the exact same thing to Alex Pereira. Just take him down pretty comfortably. And yeah, and then when it comes to Ankalaev, I think Ankalaev would be a bit tougher because Ankalaev can strike. He's quite a threat on the feet. And on top of that, he is a good wrestler. Ankalaev is a good wrestler. He's not just going to be no Cyril Gane or Alex Pereira, so he'd be tougher to grapple than Alex Pereira. And I think he'd go 5 rounds of Ankalaev, or maybe finish him late, because obviously, if you draw with Jan Blachowicz, I can't see. He started gassing out late in that fight as well, did Ankalaev. So maybe Jones would finish him late on by ground and pound. Don't think he beats him on the feet. Or maybe he'd go 5 rounds of Ankalaev. But that's how I think he'd win and get the belt. That's how I think Jones would get the belt in 2023. The light heavyweight division, it hasn't changed too much since he last fought. I mean, there's a different opposition, but it's not drastically different compared to when he last fought. So I think he beats Ankalaev and Pereira for the belt. And now we're just going to take a look at potential defenses. So now he's become champion, and he needs to feed his legacy. I've got a list of all the potential title defenses for Jones, basically just prospects in the light heavyweight division or contenders. I think he beats all of them. Now, Yuri Prohaska is a very tough one, because I think Yuri would be equally as crafty as Jones with the whole elbow, knees, and the striking. I think he'd be equally as crafty, and that's where I think Jones would kind of meet his match. And Yuri Prohaska has heart as well. He definitely has heart. He's not just going to give up immediately. Yuri Prohaska has a lot of heart, and he wants to beat Jon Jones. He would want to beat Jon Jones. And I think this could go quite similar to the first Alexander Gustafsson fight that Jon Jones had, or the Reyes fight, in the sense that it's a very close 5-round war, but Jones edges it out. That's how I see it going. I think it would be a close 5-round war, but I think Jones would edge it out and get a win. People would call robbery because the favourite didn't win. When it comes to Jamal Hill, listen, I'm not trying to disrespect Jamal Hill, but I think Jones sweeps him in everywhere. I think Jones beats him everywhere. I just see it being like OSP Part 2. Honestly, I don't really see anywhere where Jamal Hill can pose a huge threat to Jon Jones. Just OSP Part 2. Jones beats him, finishes him. Maybe not finish. I don't think he'd finish Jamal Hill, but yeah, he'd run through him a lot easier than he would with Prohaska. Nikita Krylov, Jon Jones would use his most malicious techniques that he knows to beat Nikita Krylov. Nikita Krylov's lost. I think he's underrated, by the way. I do think people are counting him out for the light heavyweight belt, but I still think when it comes to Jones, I think Jones runs through him. I mean, Nikita Krylov, if you can't lie, he has lost multiple times in his UFC career recently, so I think Jones would just beat him pretty much everywhere, to be honest with you. And I think he'd put maybe a late finish, by Jon Jones. Maybe submission as well, because Nikita Krylov, he was struggling a little bit in that first round against Ryan Spann. So that kind of worries me. Alexander Rakic. Now, Alexander Rakic would definitely be better than Jones on the feet. Jon Jones is not beating Alexander Rakic on the feet. So he'd have to submit or wrestle him the entire time. That's his only option. He'd have to take him down, out grappling him, break him down on the feet, break him down, in the grappling side of things, so Alexander Rakic isn't as effective on the feet. Basically try and do what he did against Shogun. Johnny Walker, I mean, I like Johnny Walker, but John just finishes him with ground and pound, takes him down and beats him however he wants. Usually, probably with ground and pound or submission, to be honest with you. And then Anthony Smith. I'm only including Anthony Smith because he did just beat Ryan Spann, and people are going to bring up the name Anthony Smith, but we already saw how this went. So, yeah, that is how I think Jones would do against every one of these contenders. Overall opinions on his career, if he started in 2023, I do think he'd be undefeated because the light heavyweight division is still not that competitive as a division. It still isn't as competitive, so I think Jones would run through most people. Maybe he'd lose to someone as crafty as someone like Prohaska, like I said, or maybe if, like, I don't know, some Alexander Volkanovski of the light heavyweight division was to spawn, maybe he'd lose to them. But I think Jones would do pretty well in the light heavyweight division and probably stay undefeated for a long time. But that is how I think Jon Jones would do if he started in 2023. If you agree with this, please let me know. But yeah, thanks for watching.